Hello, my friends. This is Dr. M supporting your journey with intermediate microeconomics. And today we are going to cover a lot of exciting material as it relates to family economics. And we'll deep focus on wisdom of ancients, the people that came a long time before us. And I think that would be very helpful. So what I have done in the previous session, we talked about homothetic preferences. In particular, homothetic person is someone who is consuming increasing amount of everything as budget constraint expands, and decreasing amount of everything as budget constraint contracts. So what I would like to do now is to actually do some application of faith and learning as we move along. But let me go back to my notepad and do the drawing with you. This way you will see some ways how you can do this graph on your own. So when you are looking at two-dimensional space, in particular x2 and x1 under consideration, based on gender, if you assume that woman representation is by this preference, the slope of this preference shows you the rate at which she is willing to trade x1 for x2, and for comparison we'll consider man's preference, and his preference will demonstrate the slope, how much he is willing to trade x2 for x1. For example, man and woman watch television. On one channel, they show soap opera, on the other, football game, and they're fighting for remote control. She's saying, I'm going to watch soap opera with you. And he's saying, no, we are watching a football game. So that would be an example how their preferences are different while consuming the same type of good, like television services versus some other things. So in this case, we can put the budget constraint and show that his preferences are at the point of tangency here, where he clearly exhibiting by showing the slope of indifference curve tangent to the budget constraint where he wants to be. And she wants to be over here. So the distance between those preferences, let's call it point A and point B, essentially is demonstrating how different those two individuals are. And you will not be able to meet someone identical to your preferences. It just doesn't exist. There will be some variation at all times. Thus, it is paving the way to a theory that the opportunity for someone to have a successful marriage lies under two conditions. Number one, they both like x2 and they both like x1. So it's important when man and woman, when they date, they learn about each other. And I'm actually presenting to you, my friends, marital counseling in a few minutes. If you understand what I'm doing here within this presentation, you will not need marital or premarital counseling, period. Because all premarital counseling does it identifies x2 and x1 and similar choice variables as a part of the utility function for man and for a woman, and they try to find what they have in common and how much they have to give up. Now, I said give up. I'm implying here that in order for him to make her happy where she is, he must step back with his utility, just like this, and now he is moving from A to C. So marriage for him at this point is costly. And that's what makes romantic movies are so popular. One successful romantic movie pays for 20 failures because it's just infinitely far away from reality, because marriage is the hard work and it is costly, and it's not just enjoyment, the benefits and happiness thereafter, as movies try to portray. So in this case, you will find if she decides to meet him at point A and thus make him happy, she'll have to move back to point D. So if you want to think about the marriage, it's a constant state of unhappiness, so to speak, because each of them is challenged to give up some of their happiness in order to stay together. So now I want you to appreciate the fact that the further apart their preferences, or the more they are different, the more expensive the marriage is, because they will have to travel to meet each other much further, and thus it will take a greater amount of that distance for him or for her to give up for the sake of the marriage. So you think about examples such as the highest rate of divorce is among lawyers and doctors, because they are essentially enjoying higher budget constraint, thus making marriage even more expensive in terms of the utility. You see, because the difference is going to be more pronounced, and the subjects for their arguments, which restaurant they would want to go out to eat, which place they will go on vacation, and other things that are within their utility function is becoming subject to argument. So I would like to also mention, as part of the summary, that there are two things that make marriage more expensive and making forcibly people to move closer to the divorce. And that would be how far they have to travel from each other, or how much utility they have to give up. So for him it's the amount from A to C, and for her is amount from B to D. And that's the amount of utility that depends upon the budget constraint. The further you are away from the origin into the direction of northeast, you are increasing this distance and thus making marriage more expensive by default. And finally, if you meet someone who is radically different, who is further away from you in terms of the preferences, then your distance becomes even greater. So anytime or anything that is going to expand the difference between the two of you, you and your partner with whom you want to form the family, would make the marriage more expensive. What I just have done to you is presented the marital and premarital counseling, because all they do, they identify the items as a part of the utilities and how much who is going to give up what. And if you understand this, you don't need premarital counseling. One more time, my friends, accepting low level of utility means you compromise, and that is constituting the price of the marriage. Now, you can meet someone who is willing to pay for the entirety of the marriage by giving up more of his or her own utility. And you can think about why American men like to marry a woman from Philippines, for instance. And the reason is because women from Philippines are actually delivering point D, thus paying a lot for this marriage, where American men don't have to give up a lot to stay married with Filipino women. And that's what makes them so attractive for the family formation. So that's one item. The other item is that you also want to consider is the prices for X1 and prices for X2. It's a dynamic process. They change over time, and that brings a little bit more complexity. Finally, what makes marriage more successful as an institution of the family, and thus foundational part of any society, is information. So you want to understand that essentially information is going to drive what is going to be processed by him or her when making decision in terms of the marriage. For example, I have served on the board of a Christian school where one of the board members came one day and was dreadfully distressed. And she was distressed because she was going through a very bitter divorce. She graduated from Wheaton College, a Christian institution, and basically she was sharing with us some details of her tragic marital destruction. And that was starting at the point where she met her future husband at this Christian institution, Wheaton College, and they dated for 5 years before marriage, and then they also lived as husband and wife together for another 5 years. So they've been knowing each other for a long time, until one day he basically confronted her, and that was shortly before we became a witness of her tragic event. Basically, he stated, "You know, I have never been a Christian. I have gone to the Christian college to please my parents. I have done this and that for various reasons." So that shows you that she was misled into believing that he was the man, in reality misrepresenting himself. So, and that brought this relationship to divorce, unfortunately. So that begs the question, how long should you date? It begs another question, what should you do during the date, and why date is important in the first place? In order to answer those questions, we have to be bluntly and honestly confronting the brutal facts. And the brutal facts are such that we all like to be loved and we all like to love. And that means that we are willing so much to have a part of that, to be liked and to love, that we are willing to pretend. So if you think about the first date that you ever had, and honestly think about this experience, you will likely remember that you have tried your very best to appear, maybe put on the nicest clothing you have, in terms of being presentable. Then also appear in terms of your mannerism. You would watch what you say and how you say, and maybe your voice was trembling during the first date. We basically pretend who we are not. We want send false signals indicating that we are better than who we are. And that also goes with the first time when you meet his or her parents. It's just a spectacle. It's a theater performance level where we're all trying to pretend who we are not. Well, pretending, unfortunately, does not bring any economic value. In fact, it actually is a liability, because this lady that I discussed with you about when we served on the board of Christian organization, she enjoyed pretending of her husband for too long. And imagine the level of pretense. It's just unfortunate. So the dating experience should be long enough so you can extract valuable information and reveal valuable information about yourself. So this exchange of information is the key to a more successful marriage, because otherwise you send each other wrong signals and you make decisions vital for you and your future children based on the false information. That is actually bringing us to an interesting observation. If you were to study a history in Old Testament, or actually history in most civilizations as it's reflected in the major religious practices, I am referring to arranged marriage. Arranged marriages now may look as utopian or unreal or something that you would never want to embrace, but in reality it's economic phenomena. It's economic phenomena because matchmaker was a profession where it would take enormous amount of effort and energy to find out the truancy and the reality as it relates to the information of the choice for a bride or for a groom. It's family history that becomes relevant. It's basically environment. It's not just a physical appearance. Who were parents, who were grandparents, because certain characteristics genetically can pass on. For example, if someone committed a terrible crime within the family, such instances would be avoided. And during dating experience today, this information largely not available. So matchmaking was a fairly economic phenomenon, and it was about exchanging information during the date. Now, what can you do to enhance the exchange of information, given the fact that we like to pretend and present to each other who we are not? And essentially, we're intentionally misleading each other into believing into someone we don't represent. So how do you overcome that? How do you overcome this natural inclination to move into the direction of revealing true, unbiased information about each other, at least in some manageable pieces? It does matter what you do during a date, and watching the movies together during the date does very little, if anything, in terms of exchanging information. And any sort of a pleasant type of related experience, although desirable, but in terms of utility, is very limited to what it can provide in terms of exchanging information. So some of my former students that came to me with such question, well, I want to propose to her to be married after graduation. Dr. M, can you advise us what could we do to make our marriage probability higher for success? And one of the things that I have advised in the past, that if you go camping and if you have taken a chance not to take a shower for a week, and when you only have 2 potatoes to share for dinner, there's a lot you can learn from each other during those experiences. Because it's hard to hold back who you are once those extreme and challenging circumstances come to the surface. First of all, your budget constraint shifts inward, and thus it's going to reduce the traveling distance, and that allows you to learn how a person responds, because we all are very fuzzy and fun and pleasant when things go very well for us, and once the challenge strikes, people change. And that's something that you want to know about each other, how, in what direction things will change. For example, if and when, God forbid, you become sick, or maybe your kids, future children are sick, who cares who is taking care of your children when it comes to appearances? Whether he is handsome and muscular, or maybe she is slim and beautiful, who cares at those moments about those utilitarian characteristics that society is preaching to us as valuable asset every single day? You want to have somebody who is devoted, you want to have somebody who has values, who doesn't leave you at the difficult times. So, and camping could be one of those experiences that you can, in a way, test each other and extract information that is so hidden from each other and even from oneself. You know, every person is hiding something of who they are, including with some fear and trepidation, standing in front of the mirror, revealing who she is or who he is. So now that brings us to the next slide, where I wanted you to understand that information access is critical. Now, matchmaking also brings the value when young people have to overcome hormonal disbalances. It is a very well-known fact in the field of medicine, and it has been for hundreds and maybe thousands of years, that at a certain age, when you are young and vibrant and full of energy, there are some hormonal processes taking place. Undeniably, the physical attraction is important for everyone, but at a certain age, this attraction overwhelms other things that are value added, such as character formation features and loyalty and some other things like honesty, integrity. All of that becomes very critical within any family formation. But hormonal disbalance that makes you more attracted to each other based on the physical appearance, then it becomes really, really overwhelming. I want to go back real quick to our original picture, and I want to show you that if X on the right hand side is the physical appearance, and you truly decide to marry based on the physical appearance, you are in good position, my friends, to make a prediction. I am inviting you to make a prediction. You know that aging is going to tax physical appearance. Some of us are getting bold with aging, you see, and aging typically depreciates this commodity called physical appearance. As you age, you lose the value of the physical appearance. So if you bank your dating and future marriage on physical appearance, by and large, what would you suspect to be with the probability of getting divorced? Well, of course, it will go up significantly, because according to the first law of demand, as aging depreciates the physical appearance, then it becomes more and more expensive to stay married to that person. Because what's left if originally the entire focus was on the physical appearance? All right. What I want you to understand, that matchmaking historically allowed to make marriage more successful because matchmakers could overcome the hormone disbalance that is so attached to the physical appearance among young men and women, and thus making marriage more successful. So it's really a search of appropriate profiling, and that makes it really economic efficiency. So what I would like to do next, I want you to incorporate the first law of demand into this discussion, as we just did with the physical appearance. As we age, the physical appearance as consumable item that we all want to have as a part of the utility function is rising in price. And as price becomes higher based on the first law of demand, you consume less of it. And if that's what marriage is all about, that originally initiated, then it makes marriage much more expensive. Now, what I want to do is to talk about the length of the marriage before finishing up this presentation. How long should a person stay in terms of the dating? And does it impact the successful marriage and the length of the marriage? And this is the question that we'll try to address with the next presentation. Thank you guys for your time, and we'll be back soon.